With Title Update 1, we got a few new things to keep ourselves entertained in the world of Monster Hunter. New monsters to fight, new armor sets, new weapons, and what's more, new armors and weapon skills. If there's something that really gets me excited for any update of any game, is how are the new changes going to expand on the possibilities of the player, and how are they going to shake the meta, if it ever happens. It is the reason why I like Dota 2 so much, even though I suck ass at that game. I know that it is pretty much impossible for game design to avoid falling into a meta. I mean, there's always going to be a most efficient tactic available for not only games, but for many other things as well. Having a meta is okay. Following that meta is also pretty fun when you understand it. But I think that it is always pretty fun to have alternatives that can compete with that meta in controlled or sometimes niche environments. It's the reason why I explored the possibilities of an ambush build by using smoke bombs. Stuff like this is pretty fun to experiment with. And now, we got a new skill that has certainly gained a lot of attention because of its uniqueness: White Flame Torrent. If you don't know how the skill works, the best breakdown I've seen of its effectiveness and how competitive it is was made by Krite? I hope I said that right. But if you don't want to watch his video that will completely clear all your doubts about that skill, this is what you have to know. White Flame Torrent is a skill that comes with the Socia weapons. It has a chance per hit to deal additional true damage to the monster. True damage is not something that has been explored too much in Monster Hunter. In fact, the closest thing that I can think of to the concept of true damage would be Blast Blight, because it always deals the same damage when it procs. The same goes for White Flame Torrent. It will always deal 50 damage no matter what the monster's resistance are, and no matter where are you hitting the monster. So you look at this and you might think, alright, 50 damage is not a lot for, like, say, a greatsword, but it does seem pretty neat for fast hitting weapons like dual blades and sword and shield. Was this enough to shake the meta? The short answer is no, but I don't think this is the reason why this skill is so interesting and appealing. There are two things that White Flame does that I don't think I've seen other skills do in Monster Hunter. So usually skills that increase your damage or your overall performance in Monster Hunter have specific conditions in order to get their benefit. Easy example of this can be Weakness Exploit, which gives you a ton of crit but only if you hit the monster on their weak points, which are usually the head, sometimes the wings, or their front legs. In other words, if I want to benefit from the skill, I have to be mindful of the parts of the monster that I am attacking. And I also need to know if they are actually a weak point, because for example, Reidao's legs register as a soft part, but they are not really weak points, thus not triggering Weakness Exploit. This is actually great design because it encourages the player to interact with the game's mechanics, and it rewards you for playing well. In other words, the limitations of this skill come down to the player's ability to have good uptime in the monster's part that will activate the effect. But what if maybe I'm a new player, or I simply cannot be asked to pay attention to these variables? Maybe looking at how Weakness Exploit works can look like an inconvenience, because now not only do I need to understand the intricacies of the skill, I also have to engage with the monster in a way that I might not entirely enjoy. Maybe trying to hit Rathian on the head is complicated for me because she likes doing fire breath attacks quite often and I keep getting hit by those. Or maybe I just don't want to do all the research to know every single detail about the parts of every monster. Although the head is 99% of the time a weak spot, but anyway. Those situations are something that White Flame Torrent doesn't really care about. This skill is here to help you, and no matter the skill level that you're at, it will always bring benefits to your hunt. It ignores monster hit zone values, and it doesn't require you to invest in anything else to work on its own. Like, look at this, I'm hitting the hard part of the training dummy, and even when I'm dealing less damage because this part has more resistances, I still proc the 50 damage from the skill. In fact, the only limitation of White Flame Torrent is that it doesn't work with every move of a given weapon. This is important. If we look at Insect Glaive for example, we can see how Vertical Slash will proc White Flame rather frequently. Vertical Slash is an integral part of our main combo, but it is not our strongest source of damage. In Wilds, the strongest damaging moves of Insect Glaive are Strong Descending Slash and Rising Spiral Slash. And guess what? Those two moves do not proc White Flame. What this means is that, given the damage profile of the Insect Glaive, despite how good the Socia Glaive is and how nice it is to have White Flame, we still have to prioritize our main sources of damage, and that means that we're not going to fully benefit from this skill, simply because we might not really spam the moves that can proc it as often. Instead, if we're looking to maximize our damage, I want to pull off as many descending slashes and spiral slashes as I can during the hunt, using the vertical slash combo just as a filler between moves. That said, if there's any group of people that don't give a shit about the meta, that would be the Insect Glaive users, which means that White Flame is actually amazing for them. Because let's suppose that maybe you don't like the commitment behind things like Rising Spiral Slash, especially because it removes your extracts and all that. With White Flame Torrent, I can actually just stick to using my basic combos, and I'm also proccing White Flame for using a playstyle that isn't optimal, which is the aerial combos. I know that being able to fly around is the reason why so many people pick the weapon. And now, there's actually something to look forward to if you want to reinforce this playstyle. But then, not all weapons are made equal. Let's look at the longsword for a moment. Maybe this was an accident, maybe Capcom didn't plan to have longsword play like this, but it turns out that Spirit Helmbreaker and Spirit Release Slash are not the strongest combos anymore, despite how much commitment and resources you're using behind them. The best way to maximize your DPS right now is triangle plus R2, repeat. It is just really good DPS and it has almost no commitment, meaning that you can almost always react to the monster while you're dishing a lot of damage. And on top of that, White Flame Torrent procs from this. So this is where people who do care about set building with more attention to detail start to get annoyed, because what you want is something that will engage with your playstyle, is competitive, and overall feels good. And if I'm honest with you, knowing that my strongest move in Insect Glaive doesn't proc White Flame while Longsword does, feels pretty bad actually. Remember how I said that White Flame could be really good for dual blades? Well, Demon Dance doesn't proc White Flame either, and such is the case for many other weapons. Their strongest combos don't usually proc this skill. So, make of that what you will. But that's not even what bothers me the most about this skill. It's actually the second part of the skill description and the second thing that White Flame does that really feels like wasted potential. And I quote, "When used with Scorcher, does not stack but adds extra fire damage." When I saw this I thought, wait, a skill that synergizes with another very obscure skill of the game? Interesting. Does this have the potential to bring it back to relevance?
No, it doesn't! It's fucking garbage!
This was probably the most exciting thing for me about White Flame Torrent, because the skill effect is just a proc chance to do X damage, which is not very interesting to me. But skills that have synergy, that communicate with other mechanics of the game, are my favorite type of design. It encourages experimentation and theory crafting, and above all else, these types of decisions can actually change your gameplay to make it more refreshing, engaging, or simply to mix it up a bit. White Flame Torrent tries to do this. But then, we look at how to get Scorcher, and it comes from the Rathalos set. And since decorations and other armor skills are so much more impactful, there is no reason for me to go out of my way to get Scorcher if I am sacrificing so many other things. And you could argue that it could be a nice starter set for people who still don't have a lot of decorations, but sadly, that wouldn't be true because you have Odogaron, Fulgur Anjanath, Jindahad, even Bangonga sets give you cool skills to work with much earlier in the game, way before you face Socia in high rank. And this is where I go, man, what a shame. The concept is so good. We could have more of this in Monster Hunter. Some of the most interesting effects that we have seen in the franchise are usually like this. They have a specific purpose and synergy, and you can play around with it while having really good results. I still remember how in base Iceborne, the meta was pretty much grab whatever gold Rathian weapon you could and pair it with the typical skills. Weakness exploit, critical eye, critical boost, whatever. In comes Safi'jiiva, and its armor set is amazing! It gives you crit, it gives you elemental damage, it damages when you attack, so it's a bit risky, but it rewards you massively when you can pull off its regeneration. suddenly the meta was not only shaken, it was fucking destroyed. Obviously, we cannot compare what was one of the biggest title updates that Iceborne had to the first title update that we're having with the base game in Wilds. But what I'm trying to say is that there was a chance here to start aiming to new, different directions with the armor skills with things like White Flame, but it just fell short. And you might say, but soon, there is a new armor skill that changes your gameplay and gives you a nice bonus. Yes, the Mizutsune armor skill paired with the Mizutsune weapon skill is indeed quite interesting. But while White Flame Torrent falls short because its synergy doesn't quite hit the mark, Mizutsune falls short because it offers us something that is already too easily available in the game. While Bubble Dance is a really interesting concept because it does make you change your gameplay in order to access new benefits, in this case you have to dodge 3 times for Bubble Dance to activate, and when it does, Sickle Blade gives you a bunch of crit chance, but that cannot compete with other sources of crit chance that were already in the game. And it doesn't help that even with Bubble Dance and dodging a bunch of times, the skill does not feel complete, because you could have more crit chance if you had Water Blight as well. So like what? Am I supposed to use this armor set just to dunk on some random Balaharas or Utdunas? Nah man, that doesn't quite hit the mark, does it? In fact, I can make builds that actually exploit their elemental weaknesses, and I can achieve the same levels of crit chance or more with Arshan weapons and other armor sets. And okay, maybe these things are just an unfortunate product of having Arshan weapons so early on in the game. I do have my complaints about Arshan weapons, but that's for another video. The thing is, we had a glimpse of how creative they can get with these skill effects. If Capcom makes more synergies like these, there's a lot of potential to expand the possibilities of the gameplay and of these specific interactions between skills and weapons. But I guess it wasn't meant to be this time. But that's just me. I still think that these skills, both White Flame and Sickle Blade, are great for new or more casual players. Because if you don't want to figure out the meta, if you don't want to complicate yourself with set building, here you have simple options that will work quite well in any hunt. You know, if you find yourself dodging a lot because you're still learning the attacks of the monster, Bubble Dance might be really cool to have. And if you don't want to learn about hit zones, then White Flame Torrent has you covered. Not even that, but it is generally a really good weapon to use while you work your way towards a decent Arshan weapon. So anyways, this was just something that I had on my mind in regards to the new skills that we had in the game. I really hope to see more experimental things like these in the future. Even if they fall a bit short sometimes, I still think that it is better to have Capcom work on things like this instead of having them pushing the meta even further into one single direction.
You! Get out of my sight!
Thank you for listening to my rant, and I would really appreciate it if you did any of the things shown in these stickers. What are your thoughts about the new skills? Are you guys currently using any of the new armors or weapons? Let me know in the comments below. As always, my name is Sun, and until next time.